So I get asked all the time what travel nursing was like, quote unquote, back in the day. And there's so many things I can include and so many things that actually surprise people. Travel nursing has come quite a bit from what it used to be. COVID obviously changed a lot, made a lot of people travel and or want to travel because the money was better. But the thing is, travel nursing started off pretty simple and not at all what people would be tolerating, if you will, with regards to like the housing and things like that. So I'll start off with I started traveling back in 1998, 1 year out of graduating. I had 1 year of pediatric med surg HEMOC experience. So I was, just wanted to be a peds nurse and just travel all over the country. I actually was signed up to go for my master's at the University of Rochester in Rochester, New York. I was working at Strong Memorial and getting my experience in, and was told you get 2 free classes a semester after you work there for 1 year. So I started off as a graduate nurse in May of '97, got my RN license in August, and proceeded to continue working there until the following August, when again I was signed up for my classes. They were supposed to start beginning of September, and I met a travel nurse. Was not heard of back then at all. Never even thought I could do that. And the only 2 things in life I wanted to do at that time was to be a nurse and to travel. So, so this was like I could have the best of both worlds. So I met this nurse. She was working in the med room, drawing up some medications, and she did not look familiar at all. And I said, oh, but she looked like she knew what she was doing. And I said, who are you? And she told me her name. And I said, are you working here? She's like, oh yeah, I'm the travel nurse. And I was like, what? And it was really funny. And she started to explain about the 13-week contracts we would get and the housing and is paid for. And are you kidding? I was like, I'm out of there. I was like 24 years old, I think, at the time. And all I wanted to do was get out of Dodge, basically. I was so ready to go. And so I ended up putting in my 2 weeks notice after I put my application in for the contracts or through cross country. At that time, there was only 4 companies. And I think it was cross country, American Mobile, medical staffing, medical MSN, medical staffing network. I can't remember. There's only, like I said, 4 companies to choose from. And the travel nurse that I had met had worked for cross country. She gave me her recruiter's name and said, here you go, just sign up and tell her I sent you. And so I did, and I heard back within a couple of days. Of course, I had to go down to a center to go and fax all my information, because back then we didn't have all the computer technology we do now. And I mean, back I didn't even have a cell phone, so that tells you anything. And so that was really interesting. But anyway, sent all my information. She calls me, and then she's like, oh, I got a job in Arkansas. And I'm like, Arkansas? I'm like, I was living in New York, obviously. And I was like, okay. And so she said it's for a burn ICU at Arkansas Children's Hospital. And I I just was like, wanted to look at her, even though I never met her or saw her. But I was like, I've never worked ICU, and I've never worked with burns. And she says, oh, they'll train you. And I was like, you're kidding, right? Because I'm supposed to have experience. She's like, well, you have nursing experience, but they'll train you. They won't give you any of the ventilated patients. They'll just give you the non-ventilated patients. And I thought, that is the bizarrest thing I've ever heard in my life. But I interviewed, and they wanted me to come down there. So I put my 2 weeks notice in. I canceled my classes, packed up my car, got my MapQuest thing going, got my maps, had my road atlas in my car, I think I got lost on my way down one time. I stayed overnight in Tennessee, and got there, and it was, I kid you not, I mean, I miss my family, don't get me wrong. It was the best thing I ever did. It was so thrilling and so exciting, and I was so willing to learn. So by, I think, the second week, they were training me on the ventilators. They did swans back then. And, so I was taking care of ventilated patients within the first couple of weeks. I think I was actually floated a few times to a few of the different floors. Um, so back then, they actually trained you in certain areas, believe it or not, as long as you had some experience. And, nowadays you have to have experience or there's no way you can go to a certain unit. When I went to Washington, D.C. Children's Hospital at the time, they actually trained me in their bone marrow transplant section. And it was attached to their HEMONC unit, and I worked on their HEMONC unit, which I had experience in. But they were like, oh, we'll cross-train you in bone marrow transplant. And I loved it. I mean, I loved the ICU aspect of it and the intensity, and most of our patients were one-to-one. And it was just so fascinating that I was able to learn and be taught so many different things. And when I worked in North Carolina Women and Children's Hospital, I think that was in Durham, North Carolina, they actually trained me in some of the cardiac babies. It was I think it was a regular med-surg cardiac HEMONC floor, but they had a lot of intense patients. We had a lot of post-ops for the babies with their heart problems. There were also, we took care of hemophiliacs. There was like 7 hemophilia patients that were very specialized at the time. They had a certain factor deficiency. There's only 7 of them in the world, and we took care of 2 of them at that hospital. So they required some, I just remember some intense treatments, and I was part of that. So there was a lot of opportunity to learn as you traveled, and that was what I enjoyed the most back then. And as well as obviously the other aspect that was different, very different, is how they treated you. Now, caveat to that was there was one place that treated me as if, like they do nowadays in some places where you're the traveler, you make more money, we don't like you. I was the outsider. That was at Denver Children's Hospital. Nothing to say bad about the hospital. Of course, this was 25 years ago. So it was very uncomfortable. But there's a lot of travelers on the floor I worked, and so we used to hang out all together, on our weekends off. And so that made it worth it. And of course, working with some of the kids made it worth it. So, but they were the only place that I ever went in the first probably 5 to 10 years of traveling where they treated me in such a way. But when I went, like, say, to Arkansas, when I went to North Carolina, even when I went to Bon Secours in Richmond, Virginia, they all treated me like it was actually very interesting. Like I was the new puppy. I don't know how else to describe it. It was like everybody wanted to know me, to talk to me. It's like, oh, you're the traveler. What do you, where have you been? And it was like, I just started. So I only had like 1 or 2 places. Of course, Arkansas was my first place. And I just met so many like wonderful people, so many wonderful nurses. I made fast friends. I just, absolutely loved all the places I traveled. But, it just was so different. I mean, there was just, you had, some places you had like 3, days of orientation, which is still your typical. But there's some places I'd have a whole week. My first whole week was just a week of hospital orientation, and then you had a few days of orientation on the floor. And so sometimes it was cumbersome, but nowadays you're lucky if you get 1 or 2 days of orientation. And in most places you go, and, like I said, there's some places that still do 3 days, but back then 3 days was minimum. And like I said, it was just wonderful to experience those years where you were welcomed. You were so welcomed, and you knew you were going to be welcomed. Like I said, Denver was a shock to me. I never felt welcome there. It was very uncomfortable. I was kind of left to my own. Nobody would help. And, if I needed to know where something, just basic stuff, where things were, it was, it's over there, they'd point. But there was no, here, let me show you, or none of that. I mean, it was very, like I said, it was very uncomfortable. But still love the city, still love seeing my cousins and my uncle, and out there in Denver, Colorado. So that was nice. But nowadays, like I said, the difference is huge. Housing. Oh my gosh, housing. So I don't know if getting the stipend, the tax-free money, was even an option back then. I guess I never asked because there was no cell phone. I mean, we had cell phones, don't get me wrong. I think I got my cell phone when I was out in Denver. So that was my second assignment. But I don't know when Airbnb started. Definitely no Furnish Finders. There was no Craigslist that I can remember at the time. I just remember we had to, we were given an apartment. There was a housing department with these companies. And you were given a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment that you had to share with another traveler. And that traveler is not somebody you can choose. It was basically whoever you got stuck with. That was, I mean, essentially that was it. And that's, most of the time, I mean, it was fine. There was only one time that I had, there was a travel nurse and she smoked. And of course there was a no smoking policy, or you were actually given a preference. Are you a smoker or non-smoker? Do you mind if you live with a smoker? There's all these questions. And of course I couldn't, with asthma, I was like, I don't even want to live with somebody who smoked. But of course I was put with somebody who lied and said they weren't a smoker, but they were. And the whole place reeked of smoke, on top of the fact that she would bring her 2 young kids there pretty much every other day. So she lived close by, or her kids lived close by. I don't know why her kids weren't living with her. I don't know what the situation was. It was sketchy no matter what. So I called my company. Within 24 hours, I had a new place. So they were really good about that. Any other place I stayed, the roommates were totally great and never had an issue. But of course, you didn't know, who you were traveling with, or who you were going to be living with. And it was, it was interesting. And nowadays, obviously, we get the stipend if we want. Most of the places, I don't even know if they have housing departments in some of these companies. I think most of the time you find your own housing and they just give you the money to find it. So again, that has evolved into a whole different fiasco. I know that when my husband and I started traveling in 2007, after we had the kids and started traveling together, he was the only one working. I was taking some time off of work, and we would actually get 3-bedroom apartments, and he was still making decent money. So whatever they did for their housing, I mean, we actually, had nice places that we stayed in, and we weren't cut on our pay very much at all. So it was, like I said, it was definitely a very different, I think it was easier, because they dealt with the housing. Now if you have to find your own housing, you have to put a deposit down. You might lose your deposit. You got to deal with sketchy people. Back then, dealing with, just your company, it was like you went to the leasing office, they gave you keys. That was it. You turned in your keys. I think one place we had to do a walkout inspection, but that was it. There was no hassle. So now housing can be a hassle, even if you have your own RV. Unless, of course, you're roughing it and just parking in the hospital parking lot, which, of course, some hospitals frown upon. But, you know, you still have to find an RV park. And there's places, depending on the time of year, you can't find an RV park. You know, so we do both. We have an RV, and my husband will sometimes use it for when he works close to home, like a few hours away. And because we have our farm, and sometimes he'll have to go back and check on the animals. And I, like now here out in California, I rent a room. And I have no problems renting a room because, again, I started off living with somebody I had no clue who I was going to live with. And once that roommate moved out, somebody else can be moving in the next day. So really, honestly, you just never knew who you were going to be living with. At least now when I rent a room, I at least know who, I can interview who I'm going to be living with. I can look up the house beforehand. I can look up reviews. So there's pros and cons to both. And again, I think the changes, there's good changes and there's bad changes. And, that's just, what happens with any industry, I guess, or any time when, time goes on and things change. So, of course, travel nursing, other changes, I'm trying to think. I mean, obviously computer charting, but all that stuff changes anyway with any, whether you're a traveler or not. So I can't think of anything else that really was major changes. Like I said, other than the roommate situation, dealing with, like I said, being able to train in certain areas that you weren't familiar with. There's really, and like I said, the acceptance. But pretty much travel nursing is just, nursing. You just go and do your thing for your 13 weeks. And if you like it, sometimes you can extend. And sometimes they don't need you to extend, even though you want to. And there are times when, you just want to peace out. So sometimes you leave your contract early. Even back then, I'm trying to think about leaving contracts early. I don't know if it was even it might have been an option, but I never considered it. It's like, I guess when you signed a contract, it was a contract. And I don't remember the travelers that I met in Denver. I don't remember any of them being let go. I was never let go anywhere. I was never, quote unquote, fired. So I don't know. I don't even know what was in the contracts that I signed. I think I saved them for so many years and I threw them away. But they were, like I said, they were actually written, and then we had to fax them back after they faxed them to us. And but the contract was an actual contract, not just an agreement. And you didn't, there's none of this verbal acceptance stuff like there is now. Like now, if you tell your recruiter, yeah, I think I'll take, I'm going to take the job, but you hadn't signed a contract yet, and you find something better. And I know a lot of travelers who do this, they end up being told by the company that they originally said, yeah, I'm going to take the job, that they violated the contract. And they're like, yeah, but I never signed anything. So now that's a huge issue, in my opinion. Now it's like, well, it's a verbal contract. Well, now it's an agreement. So anybody can be out of the agreement if they want to. But, if the traveler leaves the agreement, they owe the company so much money. And so, but if the hospital wants out of the agreement because they hired too many travelers, well, that's just tough. They're not going to pay you for your income lost, for your travel back to your home, none of that. So really, that aspect has gotten significantly worse. And it really kind of ticks me off that these contracts are no longer quote-unquote contracts. They're not. They're agreements. I mean, it's ridiculous if you ask me. So, I just roll my eyes and just, whatever. Maybe it's, what are you going to do? I mean, we could sit there and fight City Hall, and as nurses, we all should when it comes to a lot of other issues, so that we don't need to actually travel. And when I say need, some of us actually, I don't need to from a financial aspect. However, for my sanity, I do. I don't want to go back to staff. I don't want to have that responsibility of staff at any hospital. Most nurses don't anymore. It's such a freedom to not have to deal with staff meetings, to deal with management coming down on you to say, hey, can you start helping with the schedule? Hey, we need you to start doing this. And there's a lot of guilt that they put in on a lot of these responsibilities. And there's some nurses that actually like that, and that's fine. All the power to you. For me, I just wanted to be a nurse. I don't want to be management. I don't want to do management. I don't mind charge once in a while, but I wouldn't want a full-time charge position. So at least not at this point in my career, probably, or any point. But that's, that's the biggest difference with travel nursing from back then till now is there's quite a few actually differences now that I think about it, and they're pretty big. But as time goes on, we change, we're flexible, we just go with the flow. And like I said, just it's still going to change, and I know it will. I just don't know if the good is going to outweigh the bad, come the future times. Right now, everybody's talking again about how rates have dropped, housing prices are up, blah, blah, blah. And that's fine. That trend comes and goes. Just so you know, this happened so many times in the past, and there are times when my husband and I had no problems getting a contract together at the same hospital and working opposite shifts because of the kids. And there are times when it was really hard. And there are times when it was just him working, and I would do maybe per diem somewhere. Or I just stayed home with the kids just because it was so hard until the kids got old enough where we could leave them alone for a few hours. So travel nursing will continue to change. Again, not sure if it's going to be better or worse, but kind of like how nursing is in general. I mean, it's going to get worse in some ways because the shortage is going to get worse, and we have all these people supposedly in nursing schools coming out, but don't think there's going to be enough. There's too many nurses who are burned out. I don't know. It's travel nursing has, in my opinion, given me my sanity back. I shouldn't say back. It's kept me from pretty much wanting to quit completely from nursing. I mean, nursing is hard. It really is. But staying in one place for too long, if I'm there for a year, and I've been at places for a couple of years, and I'll, come and go. And like, this is my third time here in California at the same hospital. I like coming here, but I would never want to stay here permanently. There's just no way to deal with, like I said, the management, the requirements, working when they want you to work, not when I choose to work, or have my hours set a certain way, or what have you. But travel nursing is going to, I think, keep people from wanting to quit. So I'd give it a try, because what's bad in one spot is not necessarily bad in another. So if you have a hard time tolerating, say, new doctors, don't go to a teaching hospital. I mean, really, I try to stay away from them. I really do. I'm at one right now, and I am reminded why I need to not go to a teaching hospital again for a while. But anyway, so it's, there's certain things that might really annoy you, and you might find that is better in one place and not so bad, is better in one place, but really bad in another. And as you go, by the time your 13 weeks are done, you've learned what's really bad at that one place and the things that aren't so bad. And like I said, every place has their good and bad. It's different everywhere you go. The culture, the management, and that can change over the years too. So it's really definitely, if you've always wanted to travel, I suggest you do. Just give it a try. I mean, there's, maybe go PRN where you're at and give a local travel job a chance, or maybe go 2 to 4 hours away, so that maybe if you need to come back for a day to do a PRN shift, you can. It's definitely worth it. It's, like I said, it's been a lifesaver for my husband and I, not just financially, but like I said, we do it for our sanity. And we do it so that we don't get burned out in one place. But the industry in itself is burning us out slowly but surely, and burning out so many nurses. So, like I said, just try traveling if you want, or if you can. There's very few reasons I can see, or I can really think of, why you couldn't travel. I mean, I've met so many travelers who've had so many extenuating circumstances that they still were able to travel with regardless, whether it was, sick family members, like custody issues, things like that. They were still traveling and they made it work. So if you have any questions, or you want to discuss anything, or you want me to discuss anything about traveling, let me know. Send me a message or leave a comment, and I'll be, happy to do other videos about any of your questions or concerns or comments. And like I said, I'll just keep doing videos on my traveling, because there's a lot to share. I have a lot to share over 27 years.